Welcome to another Bobcast, and today we're going to talk about how you evaluate a property to see whether or not you really want to buy it. Is it a good deal or not? Now, you'll notice I'm holding a book here in my hands. This book is called The Challenge, and rather than you going online and buying it at Amazon, I'm actually going to give it to you. And the reason I'm going to give it to you is because inside of this book, there is a bargain finder. It's a blank form that you can literally photocopy, and I show you on the next page, how to fill it out. And it's a form that you fill out getting ready to write an offer on a piece of real estate. And the bargain finder is a very, very basic concept. You've heard this concept that what are the three most important things about real estate investing? And they are location, location, location. Ever heard that before? Well, it's not enough. You need to know more than just location. You need to know essentially 5 fundamental areas of analysis that will, once you've evaluated them, will give you a score. And over here, I've written down what those 5 areas are because we're going to talk about them. And if you're listening to this, I'm showing you a list of 5 specific characteristics. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think they are? Location is number 1, obviously, but then the condition of the property, doesn't that have something to do with whether you want to buy it or not, whether it's a good deal or not? And what about the price? If the price is too high, you probably don't want to buy it, do you? And what about the financing? How will you finance it? Where is your down payment? Where are you going to get the mortgage to be able to leverage it? And then finally, what about the flexibility of the seller? What forces them to be flexible so that they want to sell to you and you want to buy from them? These are 5 fundamental questions that most real estate investors never ask. And so I've put it together in a very simple format called the Bargain Finder, where it gives you the opportunity to ask these 5 fundamental questions and give each question a score on a scale from 1 to 3. 1 is the low end. If it scores a 1, that means it's low. It's not good. 2 is average. 3 is excellent. So whenever I ask a question about a piece of real estate in one of these 5 areas, I expect to get an answer. Is it a 1, a 2, or a 3? Because based upon my asking these 5 questions, they're all going to come up with a score in these 5 areas, and the maximum score you could get would be 15. That's 3 times 5. The lowest score that a property could score would be 4, would be 5. 5 really, but when it comes to location, sometimes if the location is bad, I almost give it a 0. Because if it's the wrong location and you're a beginner, I wouldn't buy there. Really, it's just a little too risky for your stage of investing at this time. So the lowest score is either 4 or a 5, and therefore it scored a 4 or a 5. That means that in all 5 areas of analysis, it got the lowest score, and they're more than likely you should figure out by this time, no, you don't want to buy that one, right? So we're going to go through these 5 questions very quickly, but I want to let you know that when you get a copy of the challenge, it's called the challenge. Send me to any unemployment line. Let me select someone who's broke, out of work, and discouraged. In 2 days' time, I'll teach them the secrets of wealth. In 90 days, they'll be back on their feet with $5,000 cash in the bank, never to set foot in an unemployment line again. This is the original title of the book. We changed it slightly now. The copy that you're going to get, the physical copy, if you want to get a physical copy, there's just shipping and handling, a minor expense. Bottom line is, I want you to have this copy, a physical copy of this book in your hands, so you can write on it, take notes on it. You'll also get an email, an ebook that go along with that. But the bottom line is, this book is the best book to teach beginning real estate to anybody, because these are unemployed people there's the photos of them right there that I selected from the unemployment lines. They went into the real estate market in St. Louis, Missouri. They bought a property within 90 days. One of the couples went on to make $100,000 in the next 12 months, because when you change somebody's mindset, You just changed their life. That's just all there is to it. So here, you can read how I taught these people. The story in this, it's told as if it's a fictional story, but it's actually true. It's this true story, and it's as if I'm teaching them. When you read it, it'll be as if I'm teaching you, and you'll learn the way I taught it to them. And therefore, a copy of the Bargain Finder right here, I'm going to show you how to fill out. We're going to do it now on this Bobcast, but then eventually when you get a copy of this book and you just click on this link up here, and if you want to know where you're going to www.uplife.com/the challenge. If you can't figure out which place to click on this podcast, then go to www.uplife.com/the challenge. There's a secret word hidden in the name of the challenge. Can you see that? Alan J. My name is hidden in there. I've finally figured out after many years that my name had been hidden in that word. It's kind of one of the reasons why I love a challenge, because I just love my own name, right? Well, location on a scale of 1 to 10. When you talk to the realtor or to the seller, you're going to ask them that question. Tell me about the location. And they're going to generally share with you what it's like. And using the information they share with you, you're going to give it an initial score of a 1, 2, or 3. If it's in a terrible location, people are getting murdered, the vacant properties everywhere. You don't want to buy there, do you? So you're going to give it a 1. And frankly, if you're a beginner, I would give it a 0. I want the lowest score possible. If it's in a pretty good neighborhood, maybe it's gentrifying and getting a little bit better, is not really good. Maybe you wouldn't want your family to live there. But, I won't say that. Maybe you are living there right now and that you want to get into a better neighborhood. It's a 2. And what are the specifics of the details of how you know whether it's a 1 or a 2? Well, in the book, I go into great detail about it. But for you here now, you can do this scoring system on the back of a napkin. You don't need this document. But as a beginner, it's great to have it so you can fill in every question that you have. If you fill this entire document out, you're ready to make an offer. And so for me now, I don't need this form. In my head, I'm going to ask these 5 questions and give it a score immediately. And if it scores an 11 or more, I'm going to write an offer. And if it scores a 10 or less, I'm not. It's just pretty simple. So when it comes to 1, location, is it a 1, 2, or 3? When it comes to condition, is it a 1, 2, or 3? Well, just use your common sense. 1 would mean it's a mess. The tenants moved out and left a pigsty. Needs a lot of work. Do you really want to do that? Well, you could, but we're going to give it a score of 1. If it is pretty good, maybe it's going to take $1,000, $2,000 to move people in, to kind of clean it up. That's a 2. If it's pristine and you move right into it that very next day, without any work whatsoever, that's a 3. Now, I bought properties that are 3s. I bought properties that are 1s. I probably bought properties that are 2s. It doesn't matter. You can still make money no matter what they score, whether with regards to the condition. But at least you got to know. And I'm scoring it lower. I'm leaning towards not a fixer-upper for you as a beginning investor. I'd prefer you're buying it in the 2 or the 3 range when it comes to condition. But at any rate, if you haven't asked these 5 questions and gotten enough information from the realtor or the seller to score it, then you don't know enough yet. Okay. Number 3, when it comes to price, what is the price? Now, there are all kinds of buying markets. There's There's a buyer's market and a seller's market. I'm going to use those terms in our Bobcasts for the rest of our time together. A buyer's market is when buyers usually don't buy. It's when buyers don't want to buy. It's when buyers are afraid to buy. It's when the market conditions are not good. It means people are not buying, and therefore there's no demand. And there's no demand because maybe if they've been scared away for whatever reason, 2008 to 2010, remember those years? Terrible. They were buyer's markets. Nobody wanted the real estate because there was just too much of it. It had been overbuilt. Same thing happened in 1989. The savings and loans had lent too much money, and people just snapped up the money, went and built apartment buildings all over the country, and there was no demand for the rental, and therefore the apartment buildings were empty, and it was a buyer's market for apartment buildings. So there are times in the cycle when this happens. I happened to get started in the cycle when we were just coming out of the bottom and moving up to the peak. I bought during a seller's market, and I bought a whole bunch of real estate, and that's when I made my first $1 million. When it got to the buyer's market, or the seller's market, when prices were, I sold a lot of my real estate there. And so, you need to know what the cycles look like. And when it comes to pricing, now it's difficult to find people who will sell below the market. It's usually because they don't know what their property is worth. That's why it's below the market. If they knew what it was worth, they would price it correctly. But sometimes people just list the property. They're not experts. They maybe their cousin is a realtor that doesn't really do much realting, and they just listed it with their cousin who really hasn't been in the market for a while and really doesn't know what values are, and they listed at a price they thought was fair, but it turns out to be below the market. You're hoping for a price that's at least 10, 15, 20% below the market. That would be a 3. That would score a 3 in the pricing arena. A 2 would mean on the market. That's what it's worth. And a 1 would be above the market, 5, 10% above the current market asking price. Well, what is a market? A market is whatever people will pay for it. But when an appraiser looks at a property, they're going to evaluate based upon the other properties that have sold in that city in that price range, and they were going to give it a general basic valuation of a certain value based upon comparative properties that have recently sold. So that's kind of what the market is. But sometimes people put their properties on the market in certain cities these days, and there's 10 bids come in, and people bid higher than the asking price. It happens. So you want to, during times like this, you want to find bargains by looking for foreclosures. You want to find highly motivated sellers who don't understand the value of their property, so that you know more than they do, and they have offered a price that they think is fair, and you know that it is under market. You know that the price is fantastic. You snap those up. You don't wait. You don't ask yourself the question, could I afford this? If it's a good deal, say yes and go figure it out. That's just all there is to it. So if it's can you buy a property that's above the market price? Yes, you can sometimes if the terms are right. Just having the right terms on a property where a seller doesn't need to qualify with a hard money loan from a financial institution that's going to check you one side up and down the other. If the seller is selling and carrying the financing, that's a huge advantage to a buyer. And so sometimes, yes, you could increase the price above market. But really, if you do that, you're speculating. And therefore, you got to be really careful. You got to make sure you don't have lots of negative cash flow so that you couldn't hang on to it if times got tough. You'd end up, losing properties. Thousands and thousands of investors in the 2008, 2010 marketplace, they lost everything. They couldn't hang on to their property because they bought them too high with the mortgage payments that were too high, and they couldn't rent them out so that they could make the monthly payments. And if that happens, you lose the property. You don't want to do that. But so when it comes to pricing, is it a 1 or a 2 or a 3? Circle one of those. Now when it comes to the financing, is it seller financing? That's a 3. That means it's ideal. The seller's carrying the financing, you're happy. Is it current? Do we have deals like that where sellers will carry the financing? Extremely rare, maybe 1 in 10. Right now, people want the cash and they want to go to the bank, and then it seems the loans are readily available, so that's what the way they would love it. But sometimes a seller can be convinced to carry the financing. For example, what if you say to that seller, is this a property that you're going to be using to buy another house to live in? No, it's an investment? Really? Well, therefore, you want the best investment for your money, don't you? If you sell and get all the cash, where are you going to put it? They say, well, put it in the bank. Well, what the rate of the bank is 1% or less on a savings account. If they got a CD at a bank, it could be 2 or 3%. If they got a corporate bond, it could maybe 4 or 5%. And these numbers go up and down depending upon the circumstances. But what I'm trying to say is it's probably going to be less than 5% interest. What if you say, I'll give you 6%? If you'll carry the financing, if you'll be the bank, you could take your money out of here and put it into a bank where they'll pay you 0.5%. Well, why don't I pay you 12 times that? I'll give you 6% on the mortgage. Of course, you want to make sure you're doing your numbers so you don't have lots of negative cash flow. Offer them 5%, which is 10 times more they would get at a bank. Give them a number that makes their greed glands sweat, where they go, oh, that might be good. You're giving them an opportunity to carry the financing where it's much easier because they're not going to check you out in a detailed way like a bank would, and therefore you end up with a seller financed property. Now, later on, when we get into the nothing down techniques, we're going to talk about looking specifically for seller financed properties, because I can show you if it's seller financed, it's a nothing down deal. You can use creative financing to turn a seller financed property into a nothing down deal for you, because there are so many advantages. It doesn't work with banks, but with seller financing, oh my gosh, I get goosebumps when I find a property that's seller financed because they're much more flexible and they can be shown ways that they can win bigger if they are very creative about how they hold that mortgage on that property. But I'm not going to go into detail on that now. Starting in a few bobcasts from now, we're going to go through the 50 nothing on techniques. And I'll share with you one at a time, how do you buy a property? There are 50 of them. And so we've got lots to learn there. But right now we're talking about the bargain finder. And I want you to have a copy of the challenge book where I teach it to beginners so that you can really understand it. And that's one of my gifts. I like to teach to make things simple. So that when a person's finished, I guarantee when you finish reading this book, you're going to go, I can do that. If you read most real estate books, you'll put them down and you go, I don't think I can do that. When you finish this book, you're going to go, not only can I do that, but you're going to start doing the results generating activities that will bring deals into your life. You'll start buying properties instead of dreaming of buying properties, okay? So financing, if it's a 1, that means it's bank financing. It's traditional hard money lending financing where they're going to check you out. That's 1. That's harder to do. That's why I give it a lower score. 2 would mean where maybe the seller will carry a little bit of financing, not all of it, but maybe it will help you out a little bit. Maybe you've got some kind of looseness when it comes to the the financing from some mortgage company. Maybe your cousin is a mortgage broker and will figure out a way for you to get in. In other words, if it's a little bit easier than going to a traditional cold banker, mortgage broker who doesn't know you, never known you, who's going to check you out one side up and down the other, then that's a 1. If there's a little more flexibility, that's a 2. The seller financing, that's a 3. Okay. Now, when it comes to flexibility, what is the reason that forces that seller to need to sell? Most sellers don't need to sell. But many sellers do. They need to sell the one property so they can buy the next home that they want to move to. Maybe they're being transferred out of state to another job. Well, that's flexibility. That's a reason that forces them to want to sell where they need to sell. And the deeper the problem, the more they need it. And the more urgent the problem, the more they need it more quickly. And when you have an urgent problem that is where there's a deadline attached to it, that's even better. Where a seller has a problem where they absolutely need to sell on a deadline so that they can, whatever the reason, maybe it's a foreclosure where that's the last day of the foreclosure and they need to sell it. That's the ultimate deadline, but there are a lot of other deadlines, moving to another city. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe there are a lot of reasons why people sell. Point is, what forces them? If it's a 1, that means they're really not that motivated. Maybe they go, well, I'm just decided to put my house on the market and I listed it at a high price to see whether someone would come along and snap it up. They don't really need to sell it. They're just playing, Well, you don't want them to play with you. So make sure you score. If you determine that the seller's flexibility is not that high, then you give it a 1. And how do you know it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3? It's just, first of all, read the book, the challenge book, get a copy of it, read the ebook, read the physical book. I want you to have a physical copy of this book in your hands. This book has not been published for some time, and we have republished it for you so that you can have a physical copy of this in your library. And I want you to underline it. I want to see your notes. In fact, one of these days, whenever we start getting more and more connected with each other, I want to see your notes. You've underlined pages in this book, so that I can see you actually read it. Anyway, flexibility, 1, 2, or 3. If they're not flexible, it's a 1. If they're kind of flexible, it's a 2. If they're seriously flexible, got a real deadline attached to it, it's a 3. When you're finished asking those 5 questions, you will have 5 circles around the numbers next to every question. If it's a location is a 2, you'll circle the number 2. If the condition is a 1, it's a dog, you'll circle the 1. If the price is a 3, it means it's below the market, you score a 3, you circle 3. If the seller carries all the financing, that's a 3. And if the flexibility is like they're seriously flexible, they got to get rid of this thing, then that's a 3. So you add it up. A 3 as the last flexibility, a 3 for financing, a 3 for price, that's 9. A 1 for condition and a 2 for location, that's 12. Is that good? The borderline is 11. I want you to have at least an 11. And you can see that there were there are 3 threes in that analysis I just did with you, and there's 1 and a 1 and a 2. What it means is it gives you the way to evaluate all the most important parts of a real estate transaction. And suppose it was the location was a 1. That would be on the borderline. That means that this property I just described to you that had a 12, since we lowered the score to a 1, that means it scored 11. That's still on the borderline. Now, this analysis is what you do without looking at the property. You can look at photos of the property, but without physically going through it. Why? Because you don't have time to go through every property that you evaluate. You only have time to look for the real best deals. And since your time is short, and you only have 5-10 hours a week as a beginner and using it as a part-time gig, it's your side hustle, then you will not have time to look at all these properties, to drive out and physically go through. You don't want to look at a property until it scores at least an 11. And realizing that the information is being given to you by the realtor and the seller who are biased. And they're going to want to give a higher score to these 5 areas of analysis. And so now you go look at it for yourself. You go look at and evaluate, what is this property located? Is it a 2? Is it a 1? Is it a 3? You determine yourself by looking at that neighborhood, driving around that neighborhood, realizing, maybe they're just a block off of the worst neighborhood in your city. It could work out because it could score a 1, but if it's really in a bad location, you're going to give it a 0. And suppose they told you it was a 2, and you got there and you realize that it's really a 0, then what does that property score? It scores, you thought it would be a 12. When you showed up, the location was horrible, and therefore you gave it a 0, and therefore it scored 10. You don't want it. Don't buy it. Don't even write an offer on it. Yeah, but the seller will carry the financing and the price is really good. And well, okay, if you do write an offer, then write a really flexible offer, an offer where you can really win, taking the risks you're going to have to take. Yes, you could write an offer on a 10, but realizing that the seller is probably going to reject the kind of offer you'd want to make sure you were safe enough to buy it, right? You go through and you evaluate, what's the condition like? You walk through it and you realize they said it was a dog. They're absolutely true. This is a dog. Or maybe they said it was a dog and that's why you scored it, and you walk through it and you go, this is really just cosmetic. There's no structural problem here. I could paint this whole house for a couple $1,000 if I did all the work, by the way. I could probably put a new, and so for just maybe $5,000, this thing could be a beautiful property. Well, gorgeous. Somebody would want it. So maybe I wouldn't score it as a 1. Maybe I'd score it as a 2. What about the price? Well, drive around the neighborhood and look for sale signs and stop and ring on doorbells and ask them, what's your listed price? Why did you list it at that price? Because they'll probably tell you, because the neighbor sold their house next door for that same price last week. Oh, okay. So now we have your rough, what an appraiser would do. Really, he would she would just go through the neighborhood and find out what properties were located in that neighborhood and what did they sell for. And that's how an appraisal is actually done. So you do your rough appraisal by driving around the neighborhood, and you now score it, 1, 2, or 3. What about the financing? In talking with the seller, will they carry any financing? Are they flexible in what they would take as a down payment? Do they need to have cash as a down payment? Maybe you could qualify for the loan, but you're a little tight on the down payment. Will they take your motorhome for a down payment? Do you have a vacant lot in another city that you've now decided not to build on, so now it's just part of an asset that you don't know what to do with? Could you offer that lot to that seller and say, this is the lot, this is its value, this is an appraisal, it's worth $20,000. Will you use that? Will you take that lot as part of your down payment? You tell them, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're an attorney, maybe you say to them, I'll do your taxes for the next 10 years. I normally charge about $1,000 a year for taxes. So give me a $10,000 credit for your taxes. And we'll knock that off the down payment on the real estate that you're going to sell me. See, if a seller is really flexible and has a serious deadline problem, accepting these other unconventional items as part of the down payment are more acceptable to a highly motivated don't-wanter seller. So now we're getting into the nothing down techniques, which we're going to get into in a future Bobcast. So the flexibility, we find out we do a little more digging. At first, since they didn't know who you were, when they met you, they could see that you seemed to be a reasonably honest individual. Now they open up a little bit more. And before they say, I'd rather not go into that, what the reasons for me selling. And so you don't know what to score it, so you give it a 1 there. They don't have a highly motivated reason to sell. But then when they meet with you and they say, to tell you the truth, I've got cancer and I've got 6 months to live, and I need to get rid of this property. And if I own it free and clear, so it would be kind of fabulous if you would be the bank, and I could have you, because if I put the money in the bank, it's just going to get spent. I want to send my kids to college. So if they got a monthly stipend as a result of the payments that came out of this house, because you're willing to offer me a higher interest rate than I could have it sitting at the bank, they're going to need monthly payments for their rent and the things of that nature. I've got 2 kids. My wife has passed away, but my 2 kids, if they could get half of the monthly payment, and it would come directly, so you'd send half to one and half to the other as a result of that monthly payment you're going to make. It's a higher interest rate, so the payments would be a little bit higher. This would be a perfect solution for me. And therefore the kids wouldn't run off and go spend it on, cars and girls and boys, In other words, this would be a way to divvy out the money so they couldn't get into trouble with the money. See how that worked out as a perfect solution to the seller's problem and to your problem? You don't want to go to the bank. And if the seller doesn't need you or doesn't want to go for you to go to the bank so that the cash would be given to the kids that they'd spend it, then it's a win-win. See that? So once you get into it and you discover that this is a perfect solution, this gives a score of 3. And so by looking and evaluating and visiting physically, if you can, with the seller, you get the opportunity to get more information so you can make a final judgment. And if it finally scores 11 or more, then you write them an offer. You can make a verbal offer if you want to. You can say to them right there on the spot, I think the price would be very fair at $210,000. And if they go, ouch, that's a little stiff, that's a little low, then you can have a verbal conversation. Or if you're afraid to have that conversation, and most people are, it's kind of scary, frankly, because they're sitting right there. That's sometimes why when a realtor is involved in the middle, it can be it can be a little easier in the negotiation. But remember, you want what you want. So if you write them a written offer and you ask them to give you the courtesy of a written response. For example, I've had people make offers to us in homes that I've owned, my wife and myself, and the offers were lowball offers. They were terrible, and we just didn't accept them. We were so offended by them, we wouldn't even write a written counter offer. But the seller never asked us to do that, never really pushed us. And what I'm going to ask you to do, if somebody rejects your offer, that you actually ask the seller as a matter of a courtesy to you. Since you took the time to look and evaluate and write the offer, at least if they reject the offer, have them sign what they would accept, and maybe all they would accept is what they've actually published to the world. They have a certain price and certain terms. So just say, your offer is rejected. My counter offer is exactly what I wanted, which is my full price and all cash, right? At least they now have them physically writing it down. And not every time will they do it. Sometimes you make a lowball offer, they're offended. And you don't want them to be offended. You want them to realize it's your best offer. You want them to win. The price doesn't seem like it's winning for them now. But who knows if a few months go by that they might change their mind. And therefore you speak to them in that way, like a friend. Just say, I'm not trying to offend you. I want to win. I got to get a price because I'm an investor. And obviously you want as much as you can possibly get. I get that. So I'm going to make you an offer, and if it's offensive to you, if it's something, maybe don't use the word offensive. That's an offensive word. If it's something you don't want, then have the courtesy to write down what you do want. Maybe you'll accept 1,000 less, and then make it that way. Because more than likely, if they reject the offer, then they would probably write you an offer $1,000 less than what they were publishing to the world. If they got that, they'd be okay. But at least they've written a counter offer to you, and therefore that's good news for you. Okay, so this is what we call the bargain finder. You're going to get a copy of this book. Get it. Don't miss it. This has changed thousands of lives, and it shows exactly how you, regardless of your financial circumstances, you may be just like the folks in the unemployment line who are a little tight when it comes to your money and your down payments and your credit and everything else. This shows you how you can do it, starting with no job, no cash, no credit, no cash flow, nothing, no collateral. You own nothing. This shows you how to do that. And hopefully that'll never happen to you. But if you are there now, you need a copy of this book. And if you know somebody that is in those kind of circumstances, and they're talking to you about real estate one day, and they go, I can't afford real estate right now. I've got our money's tight, and we're trying to save up for a down payment. If they say that to you, you say, stop it. Don't save for a down payment. Get this book, The Challenge. It shows you how to buy property, even if you don't have a down payment, even if your finances are terrible. This is how you get started, and you got to start looking for deals right now. You can't wait to save for a down payment 4 or 5 years from now. You know what's going to happen to real estate values 4 or 5 years from now? You need to be looking now. Okay. All right, my friends. I appreciate you. Hope this has been valuable to you. Make sure you go down below in the comments on the podcast if they are available in the way you listen to podcasts. Let me know what you thought. Give me some advice on what were the ahas you had as a result of this conversation. Find me online. I'm on all social medias. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all over the place. It's usually Nothing Down Robert Allen is one of the handles that we use. Just find me on social media. Let me know what you think. And I wish you well. Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.